Today there are many different church planting models, and there's a lot of different terms that are thrown around. And so some planting strategy definitions are things that we're going to carry today. The first is a partnered start or mother-daughter relationship, and that's when an existing congregation or perhaps several churches serve as an anchoring, sponsoring, or parenting force in launching a new church. Unlike a multi-site, the daughter church is intended to develop into a full-fledged church of its own, independent of the mother congregation. A parachute drop or a classic missionary approach is when the parachute drop of a classic missionary strategy is when a planter is sent into a territory to start a new faith community in which the planter is not from that area and there are no active partnerships with other churches or Christian institutions in that area. This is church planting from scratch. Multi-site model, this is among the most popular planting strategies today, and it has a high rate of success if the mother campus is healthy enough to pursue it. It's when an existing church starts a new faith community offsite, which acts as a campus ministry of the original church. Unlike the mother-daughter model, the new community remains under a common umbrella with the original church that may be maintained through various means of oversight or shared accountability. The church and its multi-sites will function as one church. It's critical that both the senior leader and the planting pastor be trained and are ready for this. Another model is the restart model. It's when either a pre-existing church or an attempted plant failed, but the conference, if you're in the United Methodist terms, or partners still believe a new faith community can flourish in that area, so they decide to try again, usually with new leadership. Existing property or assets from the old community are used by the restart, but old buildings may be liquidated or sold to seed for the new one. A vital merger model is unlike other types of mergers where one church folds into another existing congregation. Vital mergers occur when two or more existing churches agree to form a completely new faith community. The idea is to start fresh with both congregations selling their properties and pooling money and resources together to form a completely new community with a new name under the leadership of a trained planter rather than under the leadership of one of the church's former pastors. This is not a merger for survival, but a merger for the sake of reaching new people, which is different from a normal merger. More than one location can be retained in the merger. Then there's the Elijah-Elisha model. This strategy requires a proactive discernment process with everybody involved. Congregations may either discover a new vision and recommitment to fruit-bearing ministry or respond to God's call to become an Elijah new church start, like in 2 Kings chapter 2. It tells us how Elijah passed on the legacy of his ministry to Elisha. Elijah churches intentionally choose either to join another church and give their physical assets to the maybe greater good to reach a new group or people, or open their doors to a planter and a launch team that takes over complete management of the facility to start a new congregation. Sometimes the facilities are liquidated with funds and reinvested in new space and ministry startup cost. Fresh Expressions is designed by planters in Britain specifically to reach the unchurched. A fresh expression is a catch-all for contemporary communities of varying size and shape that focus on fellowship, mission, and or group discipleship as their first priority. These fresh expressions experiment with what a church can look like in the 21st century. Often there are no worship service or sacraments. Sometimes a fresh expression project may develop into a new church start. A fresh expression may overlap with other forms of non-traditional church planting as well. Another strategy is lay-led. The name says it all. Lay-led plants are any faith communities of any size where a layperson is assigned as the planter and primary shepherd of the community. Some lay planters may be people in the process toward ordination, while others may be certified in some way, shape, or form. Then there's the part-time model. Sometimes a conference or an individual may opt to be a planter that serves a new ministry on a part-time basis while they hold a job outside of ministry. This can be a good strategy if funding to support a new plant is tight or there is a shortage of available full-time pastors in an area. However, making sure the time commitments for the part-time planter match expectations is critical. Another strategy is a surprise birth. A church is started with no initiative from any existing partners. The people may or may not have any prior affiliation with churches in the past or denominations. It's important that such churches decide what their theology and polity and accountability measures will be. There's a church within a church model, and sometimes a new church or faith community may start meeting in a property belonging to an existing church but still function as a separate community with its own members, ministries, and leadership. In other cases, the new faith community functions with members in the existing church but simply forms around a new worship community designed for a distinct population. These arrangements may be temporary or permanent. Existing congregations choosing to share property may find that new churches may be better to serve their immediate neighbors. Then there's the spiritual enterprise model. Maybe you've seen faith communities that operate out of a coffee shop or a diner or other business outlets. These aren't simply churches meeting in places of business, but rather churches running the business. This can be a great model for reaching the unchurched and millennials, and because sales help offset the cost of ministry, many spiritual enterprises can reach sustainability and devote more time and resources to outreach. The business model, however, needs to be carefully developed and vetted. Another strategy is house churches. Christianity began with Jesus and his disciples meeting in people's homes, and this practice continued for some time before the first separate church buildings appeared. Many early Methodist groups under John Wesley also met in private homes weekly. Many new churches may begin meeting in homes and coffee shops as part of a first 12 group or a planting team. These are perfect venues for small group discipleship. Sometimes house church community may decide not to extend into a traditional congregation or may instead opt to form a house church network with other groups in the area that may meet together at a large venue only infrequently. In other cases, the house churches form a network and function together as a campus of sorts with relationship to and oversight from a pastor of an anchor church. Then there's the intentional neo-monastic type of strategy. It's a community. A group of people may choose to form their living situation around Christian fellowship by creating an intentional community. Sometimes people might share a residence or simply commit to living near one another and engaging in daily rituals of fellowship and piety together. The community is bound by a shared covenant that requires regular acts of piety, worship, mercy, and justice. Naturally, these groups will remain small, but the deep level of commitment from the members to outreach and social justice can have a great impact on the surrounding area. Then there's an online community strategy. In the digital age, we are now able to connect and build relationships with people all over the world without having to meet in person. Churches, too, are finding ways to reach people with common interests and ideas who are miles away. Not only are churches streaming their weekly services to reach a larger audience, but some are also building interactive faith communities whose entire existence is online. This works best with people who are comfortable in online engagement. It's also a way to offer church to people who are living remotely, maybe in a non-Christian country, for example, or in a rural area. Missional church is also a strategy as well. Missional church sees themselves primarily as servant disciples engaged in outward evangelism and service to a community. Instead of focusing primarily on internal programs, missional churches are always looking outward to the community they serve and will seek to be the hands and feet of Christ to that community. Because of their focus on mission as well as their presence in a less affluent community area, missional churches may not develop into traditional large member congregations and may continue to rely on financial support from other organizations or partners in the continued efforts. There's the lean startup strategy. A lean startup plant might use almost any planting strategy, but with the understanding that their funding is minimal. Maybe they got a micro grant or something like that. A lean startup may use volunteer leaders in lieu of paid staff. It may be led by laity rather than clergy, at least until it grows to a certain point. It may borrow meeting space rather than pay for it. It may remain small by design and then multiply, or it may grow into a large and complex congregation. There is a lot of different factors that go into the strategies. And so it's up to the planter where their call and affinity is, and also the area in which they want to be in, and how God is going to direct them.